I'm not concerned about the strength of the dollar. I'm concerned about the rest of the world. Does that make sense?
Can you explain that?
Yes. Our economy is strong as hell. The internals of it. Inflation is worldwide. It's worse off everywhere else than it is in the United States. So the problem is the lack of economic growth and sound policy in other countries, not so much ours.
That was President Biden speaking to reporters at a Portland ice cream shop over the weekend. Made me hungry for ice cream. The commander-in-chief is facing backlash online for a seemingly sunny outlook on the economy, even after last week's CPI report shows inflation still on the rise, actually. What do you think, Ameshia? Is his tone kind of correct there?
The second half of his message was absolutely on point, factual, and I think strong. We are doing a lot better than the majority of countries across the globe. Our economy is doing better now than it was doing at the early onset of the pandemic, even better than it was at the beginning of this year. However, inflation numbers are what they are. So when you're talking to a generalized American public that cannot pay rent, that cannot afford their housing costs, that can't afford, their energy costs, and things are about to get chillier across the country. Can't fill up at the gas tank, can't afford food. It sounds pretty tone deaf. So I think that off the cuff Biden is usually not the Biden that sells well. This is one of those
on the
times
cuff Biden doesn't necessarily sell much better. But
this is one of those times where you kind of have to read the room. Americans' number one priority going into midterms is inflation. It is our economy, and I do get it. When you look at the economic numbers, if you're an economist, if you're a financial expert, they look better than they do to the average American who is looking at that grocery list and deciding what they have to check. What they have to scratch off because they simply cannot afford to get it. You have to juxtapose those two because Democrats are on the campaign trail right now, and making our economy look sunny to people who are literally living paycheck to paycheck is not necessarily, in my opinion, the best way to go about it.
No, it's a bad message. Why try to sell that message? You have to sell, we know things are tough, we know things are bad. Here's what we're going to do, and here's what we need to do to bring down food costs, to bring down energy costs. I don't know, whatever the administration is doing, it's very confused on several fronts. Fixing the energy price, gas affects so many other things. We know how, for instance, the Ukraine-Russia war is contributing to all of this by putting our energy prices and some food prices all out of whack globally. It's true. It's a global problem. I take that. Not a particularly U.S. problem, but of course U.S. policy matters. Like we're going to Saudi Arabia is going to send us less gas because we mismanaged that relationship. Well, what about Iran? What about Venezuela? What about the other thing? We're something.
Seeing renegotiations with OPEC. We know that the supply chain issues still exist. I'm a little bit, I push back somewhat on the Ukraine-Russia war just because at the end of the day, our energy dependence has never been on them. Actually, America gets less than 4% of its gas from them. There are countries that are a lot closer to Russia that are a lot more energy dependent on them than we are.
Yeah, well, they're really suffering.
And to his point, the second half of his ice cream extravaganza was noting that everyone is seeing inflationary costs rise. Everyone is having this problem across the globe. We have turned out better than the majority of nations. That is absolutely factual. But if I'm having a hard time feeding my kids, that's not the argument I want to hear.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time feeding myself. I
don't have kids.
I'm a person of, I don't have kids either. I'm a person of privilege, to be clear. But I'm looking at the bill sometimes for the shopping, the grocery list bill, or the bill for just, if you run out to get lunch or something, grab on the go. And go, oh my God, $15 for what did I get? A sandwich, a cup of coffee?
The cost of milk and
nuts.
cereal. To your point, as somebody who isn't necessarily living paycheck to paycheck, I know what milk costs were just 3 or 4 months ago. And now it's well, I might have this cereal and not this milk because I just refuse to pay it. I think we reach a point where it becomes extremely difficult to make this sound rosy when everyday people are struggling. And we have to acknowledge that. Americans' paychecks are not increasing. And the fight to bring back the fight for a new normal, I don't even know what the old normal was. People were struggling then too, but they're struggling more post-pandemic. There has to be a different messaging strategy. And it was disappointing, I think. And, like I said, the second half of his argument, I totally understand. The first part, he could have phrased differently. Again, being tone deaf during a midterm election year is probably not the way you want to go, especially when the economy is people's top priority when it comes to policy.
And one of the relative strengths that that the GOP has versus Democrats, people might not like Trump personally or like his behavior on Twitter. I certainly don't. But they liked the Trump economy. I mean, the voters.
They liked what they thought the Trump economy was. Trump's tax policies benefited the wealthy. They actually did nothing for the middle class, and they totally forgot about lower income individuals.
Life was better for the middle class.
This is the same guy who was trying to pull SNAP benefits away at Christmas time, literally taking food stamp benefits away from our poorest people around the holidays.
But
so
the
I'm
structure
not
of the economy
necessarily
was
going to go
good
with that
for
one.
small businesses, good for working people.
It depended on who the small business owner was. Talk to small business owners in the black community, and they will tell you that is absolutely not factual. So again, I think that it depends on who you talk to and what segment of the population. Because yes, there are some people who continually tout the Trump era policies, but these people were typically better off in the economy anyway, and they had higher earning potential. So we have to look at that and take that into context. The tax breaks for the rich were great. If you were wealthy, if you owned yachts, if you owned private properties in multiple states, it was great. But if you were the single mom, you were, still struggling. It was still a hard climb. If you were the person who
But
was
you're really
trying to
struggling
return
now,
to,
though.
No, absolutely.
You're
Part of
really
that is also,
struggling now.
the cost of trying to come back after a global pandemic.
Yeah, your kid's school might still close. You can forget about going to your job, your low-paying job. You don't even have that job because you can't go because you're taking care of your kids.
And part of that is that's Republican policies, because Democrats have been pushing for child care, universal child care and child care assistance for quite some time now. There was in the the post-pandemic era, there were several bills that were passed by the Democratic-led House specifically to address child care issues, and not a single Republican supported it. And quite frankly, we had two Democrats who also caused problems with that in Manchin and Sinema. But we can't not be honest with the people here. There was a very strong push from Democrats to address that specifically, and we've seen it fall on its face largely because of the right.
All right, we'll have more Rising right after this. Stay tuned.